Thanks for jumping on this morning. I see some people logging in from across the country, so welcome to the KLear Channel. I know people in our office are just getting things moving, but we are going to get started right away because we have an incredible guest today that I'm really excited to introduce you guys to. So thank you so much. So first things first, as I always say, for anyone that's new into the call today or new in the offices across the country, please turn to your friend to the left, to the right, pull out your cell phone, go to YouTube, type in KLear Channel, KLear Channel. We're at close to 900 subscribers. And I remember when we had two, me and my second YouTube account. So I remember those days, and thank you for subscribing. So guys, we're gonna jump right in. I have my friend Matt Storm on the call today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his background. We're going to do a brief intro. We're going to jump in and get to know him. But an incredible guy. So as we were just chatting a minute ago, we share something in common. You know, our biggest goals in our lives would be great dads and great husbands. But beyond the most important job in the world, in my opinion, I want to share a little bit about his background. He's a former professional athlete, and I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about that today. He runs a YouTube called Friday Fitcast as the host. He's a CEO of Stormtrooper Productions. I know on some of the apps and some of the different social media sites, got close to 16,000 followers on Clubhouse, an app that we met each other through. Barb Majeski, a good friend of mine, and just an incredible guy. He runs currently a national fitness event production, so he's going to tell you about that and some of his pro career highlights. He was a Hawaiian Pro Champion 2018, Oklahoma Pro Champion 2018, and Mr. Atlas World Championships. He was in the top 5 when it comes to fitness. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. I know you're Central Time, so it's a bit earlier out there, and we're excited to have you.
Oh, truly an honor, Ken. Thank you for having me, and very excited. Been looking forward to this for a while now, so appreciate you.
Yeah, no worries. So Matt, just to jump right in, can you tell us about life and growing up? So anyone that watches the channel or anyone that wants to get to know you, a little bit about maybe family, home, and growing up.
Yeah, so it was really interesting because when I first started to realize what I wanted to do and what I didn't know was at a very young age. And if you think back to your first memory, I can think to my first memory at really 4 years old when life-changing events happen. We either remember the things that are like really, really good, or we only remember the things that really had an impact on us, possibly negatively. And so we lived in Chicago, Illinois. My parents ended up getting divorced when I was 4. And we ended up moving to Houston. And my father stayed in Chicago. And that was my first real memory of like family and relationships. So when we moved down here, my sister, who's 7 years older than I am, and my mom, she would work 2 jobs, and we would just kind of muddle through those 9 months. I would go back up to Illinois and spend those 3 months with my dad. So I was back and forth in transient for the first, I would say, 12 to 13 years of going through school. So my recent memory allowed me to not only become a better family man, but it also allowed me to find my purpose. And, as I was going through high school, I finally realized that, being a pilot might be the way to go because my father was a pilot. My grandfather was a pilot. So that led me into this career of thinking I was interested or curious about wanting to do something that my family had an attachment to. And I always wanted to have that relationship with my father, right? Being able to talk about the commonalities of what we do for a career. And about my first year in, I went to the University of Illinois, and I ended up realizing very quickly that that was not the route I wanted to go. And that was a hard decision because, it's like you want to make your parents proud and you don't want to let them down. And, I had a conversation with him and very simply, he said, you know what, you don't have to do what I did or what your grandfather did. Do what makes you happy and what you love doing and waking up to. Because if you're miserable waking up to the things and you feel like you have to do it, it's going to be a long life. And at 19 years old, when you tell somebody that, you're not really sure exactly how they're going to take it, right? And
Yeah.
So at that point, that was the start of my Cutco career, believe it or not. I ended up really finding a passion in sales, people, and networking. So hopefully that answers just the first part of your
Yeah.
question. I could go deeper, but that's really where I started to awaken to see what I wanted to do and how we could really impact the world.
Yeah. And I remember we talked about it briefly, the Cutco experience, the sales experience. So before you got into doing all the things in athletics, I'm sure you're obviously doing athletics then and kind of working towards it. What did you learn about yourself doing sales early in your career?
Yeah, I learned that sales was probably much easier than athletics. And the reason why is because when you play basketball, baseball, football, when you play all these sports that are kind of the major popular sports in junior high, you think that they're going to translate into high school. And unfortunately, Ken, I did not grow with my class, which means they grew taller, they became faster, and they were much bigger. And, you know, when you get left behind and you try out for freshman and sophomore, junior varsity and varsity sports and realize you're not good enough to make the cut because you're still, 5'11" and 120 pounds soaking wet, you have to learn something and a skill because you realize you're not going to play professional sports for a living like we all thought we were going to play. So that was something that was a real big eye opener. And I chose volleyball. I happened to have boys volleyball down here, and that ended up becoming my ticket going to University of Illinois because I did play in college and ended up becoming a coach and also a national level official. So I learned a lot in sales because I was able to play sports and do sales. And one of the things that I found very simply on was people are going to want and need things through life. And we have to find their pain points and what they want and what they need and why they need what we have to offer. And Cutco was a great thing because not only did we go in home, it's crazy. If you think about this whole concept, an 18 or 19-year-old who basically needs to generate their own referrals, do in-home appointments with customers, and go show them cutlery, something they already have, but also show them why they need this and why it's better quality for them to upgrade into something that they might not had on their radar. And we're talking $1,000 sets here. We're not talking about a $20 bill that says, hey, here's a mercy sale. We're talking about thousands of dollars. And I learned very early on that if you show people the benefits of why they might be able to use something that you have to offer, and you close all the doors and you show them why they will enjoy it much more than what they currently have, oh my gosh, that can apply universally to anything in life. And I found those skills to be crucial very early on at 18, 19, and 20 years old to be able to run successful businesses in the future.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, my background is door to door and business to business when I created this thing and kind of grew up at it. So that's awesome. So tell us a bit about your professional sports career. So you get through college, you're playing some volleyball, took you to college, and how'd you get into the sports that you're in now?
Yeah, great question. It was interesting because 2014, if we fast forward, we're out of college. I'm running a district office for Cutco. I did that for 20 years. Wanted to kind of work out because there was a health scare that my doctor said, look, you're very stressed out. You're doing well in business, but you're not doing so well health-wise. And I'm like, dude, I'm skinny. I'm in my 30s. Come on, man. I might not eat right, but I'm still okay. He goes, your blood pressure is high. You have the early warning signs of possibly having a heart attack. So you might want to take care of that. And I'm like, no, that's not me. And finally, I started waking up to where each morning was a little bit more difficult to get out of bed. And I realized that I was putting 80 to 100 hours a week in business. And so going to church at the time, and my buddies decided, you know what, why don't we go and hit the gym in the morning before we all go to work? So we said, cool, let's do that. So we were hitting the gym together. We were talking, we were working out, we were training, having good conversation. And one of the guys comes up one day and says, hey, there's this new bodybuilding category called men's physique. And you get to wear board shorts and you go out and hit 3 or 4 poses. And you know what? You might be able to become a professional athlete. And we're like, oh man, that sounds easy. Let's do it. And so all 5 of us make this pact and we're like, we're in, let's do it for 20 weeks, 5 months. Let's train really seriously for it. And let's see what we can do. 2 weeks into this, Ken, I look around the gym and I'm the only one left in the gym. Everybody said, oh, my wife doesn't want me to do that. Oh, I don't want to eat right. Oh, I can't hire a coach. Like literally every excuse in the book came through. And I'm sitting here looking like I got to make a decision here. And this was a pivot, right? It's either, well, I could probably do what they did and not show up anymore, or give a reason why I couldn't, shouldn't, or can't do it. Or number two is I'm going to follow through and see this thing through. So hired a coach, hired a nutritionist, and I went to go seek out the best, right? Who has already been there and done that? Got a 3-time world champ to train me, got a nutritionist who was at the highest level at a time in Houston where there were multiple organizations. And I said, look, I'm a natural athlete. I want to be able to compete at the highest level as a natural athlete. What can you do? So we went through this program. And let me just be clear. I didn't follow the program 100%. Let me tell you the result. My very first show, I'm very excited. Can't sleep the night before. Get on stage, do my thing. All my parents, friends, wife, kids, they're there to support. And I take dead last. And that was like a dagger, because I thought that this was going to be the start of something amazing. And I'll never forget this conversation I had after that show. Judge comes up to me and she goes, hey, how do you think you did? I'm like, how do you think I did? How do I think I did? You know how I did, because you were judging me. And according to all the judges, I was dead last. And she goes, well, that's not what I asked. How do you feel like you did? And I'm like, well, I thought I did great. And she goes, did you follow everything that, you were told to do? And she had this little look on her face, because I knew where I was going to have to go with this. And I go, well, I pretty much did everything. And the word was pretty much. And she goes, you know what? The people you were competing against, you have nothing to be disappointed about. These people have been doing this for years. They've been following a strict program. And you know what? They put just as much work, if not a lot more, into this prep. So I would highly encourage you, give it another shot, because not everybody goes and turns pro their very first show. And I had to think about that, because I thought that this was going to be easy. And when we think about life, we think about when we start something and we have no idea our skill set and what we're going to do. Well, my coach immediately the next day calls me and he goes, hey, by the way, there's another show in 10 weeks. It's in San Antonio. Let's do it. I go, man, I don't know if I should be doing this or not. I've got a wife, I've got kids, and, they just saw me fail. He goes, you know what? You're going to fail if you don't do the show. So it's your choice. And I go, let me think about it. And so he calls me the next day. He goes, did you think about it? Because I already signed you up for the show. And I'm like, but I didn't even pay for it. He goes, I already registered you. I believe in you enough to be able to actually go make this thing happen and actually follow it this time and do it right. So 10 weeks, fast forward, I go to San Antonio, enter 3 categories, which my coach signed me up for forcefully. And I'm so glad he did, because that was the start of the confidence and encouragement that I need. Took first place in every single category. And you know what he said? He said it wasn't about the placing. It's that you continued and didn't stop. And I said, well, what does first place mean? He goes, first place doesn't mean anything except that you showed up that day, your best and their best. Meaning you did everything you possibly could to show up, and you have no control over who shows up. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool. So that was the beginning of actually the confidence level to move into that next echelon, which I knew was going to be not only 5 times leveled up. I knew that also I'm going to need to find the best people who have already been there, done that at the pro level, not at the amateur level, because anybody can win an amateur show. When you go to a pro show, that is a whole nother level. And I took 2 years off to actually train, to focus, and to really find the next level in me. And I surrounded myself with a different group of people, and that was the best decision I ever made as well.
That's awesome. It's just so interesting to me, right? Like when you're the elite at a craft, whether it's in sales, whether it's in business, whether it's in sports, and especially what you just said, what I just heard was, when you do anything at 80%, it's nearly impossible. When you do it at 100%, not that it's easy, just that you make progress, you accomplish when you play all out, when you live life that way. And so that's awesome. And so tell us about your business now. So you obviously took the steps to get better. And then I know you and I talked a bit about you're running the shows now. Is that, tell us about that.
Yeah. So 2018, when I did turn pro, it was the very end of 2017. I felt like sometimes we feel like we need to establish ourselves as a go-to or an authority or some level of success at a professional level, because if you're going to do something and step off the stage one day, that spotlight is going to dim on that chapter of your career. And I believe that leaders sometimes they think that they might be invincible, and they might think that that spotlight is going to burn forever. And I realized that that chapter was going to close. So I took advantage. When I did turn pro, I said, look, I told my wife, I said, I'm going to need your support over this next year. I'm going to plan on doing 2 pro shows, possibly 3. And she goes, you realize that's going to be a lot of time off work. That's going to be prepping every single meal for 6 days a week, or excuse me, 6 times a day. And that's 7 days a week. And that's going to take 2 to 3 hours of your day to train and do cardio. The reason why I bring that up is because that led me directly into the shows in 2019. I have to tell you, the first pro show, I did feel like there was going to be a time where I might not get off the couch because completely dehydrated. See, a lot of people don't see behind the scenes when you compete. I didn't want to actually go do the show because I was so exhausted from the travel, from the depletion, from the food. I thank God I had a friend who was there who traveled with me to Hawaii, and we had a beach house. And the reason why I bring that up is because he said, look, I'm going to feed you. I'm going to make your meals for you. You just focus on resting. And you know what? You've trained intensely. We're going to get you to the finish line. And I ended up winning that show. And I have to say that there was some really stiff competition, but I realized that some athletes need to understand the health and the long-term game when it comes to this. So did Oklahoma, got a chance to get a win there, did the Atlas, the World Championships, took top 5. And I said, now it's time to start running shows. What I noticed was some of the shows were amazing. Promoters, directors, staff, they actually really cared on how this event or production was being run. And I said, there are some things that I want to do to be able to give to the athletes, because the athletes work their tail off. They invest thousands of dollars. Most of them don't make a dime doing it, and they all go for a plastic trophy. And we want to make sure and have these athletes do it healthily. So 2019, I got a chance to do my first show where it was like a production. And if you ever know the wrestler Booker T, I did it at the Booker T Arena. Him and I have been friends for a while. And so we got a chance to run our very first production in October of 2019. It was the largest show the organization has ever seen. And from what I understand from the athletes, because it was a big blur, you know, something happens to where you're going to really make that a memory. Our senior director passed away the night before the show. He was supposed to be at the show, and he was supposed to bring a lot of the things. And when I heard the news Friday night, the day before the show, it was devastating. And we all pulled together for a common purpose to actually mask what we were feeling, do what we needed to do, and then feel it afterwards. And I have to say that group of people was very, very special, because since then, since the Storm Classic, so to speak, was birthed that day, October 19th, 2019, I remember that day. We'll never forget it. Now we're in our 4th year of production. We have since run shows in Scottsdale, Arizona, the sister show, the Desert Storm Classic, and also at the MGM Grand. It was a 2-day event for the Global Qualifier, which is the Global Invitational, Global Open. I have to say that every show is different. It's a learning experience, and we absolutely love what we do, because now we have people from all over the world coming in for this event coming up October 29th, and absolutely can't wait. It's been the biggest blessing in disguise.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell me, what habits, like how does someone go from, you know, someone who went through a lot of, you said transient times and family, to now having from what I can see and tell and in conversations, have a great family at home, successful entrepreneurship. Like, what are those habits, right? It's ironically in our organization, there's some people in this call today that started 75 hard with me today. So it's another thing. I did it at my wife's birthday, so I'd remember the date because she made fun of me recently. She thinks I forgot the date. But anyways, so what are the habits? What is the mindset that helps you grow, succeed, get through times? Can you share some of those habits you had to, maybe pick up or hone along the way?
Yeah. And I heard it is Mrs. Lear's birthday, so happy birthday.
Fan favorite.
Exactly. And the habit is remembering birthdays. That's number one. If we forget birthdays for our significant others or our kids, it's like game over. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. When it comes to habits, I believe that very simply, there was really too much for me or anybody else for that matter to understand that they can take this life on by themselves. It's a lonely island if we don't create the right habits. And there's a lot of habits that we pick up as human beings. And if you think about your life and how you've done it, you could probably point to some things where you're like, yeah, this is okay to do now, but I got to change it later. For example, the type of nutrition that we have, the amount of water that we drink, the type or the amount of sleep that we get. There are all these little things that actually coincide and integrate into saying, you know what, all healthy habits sometimes become unhealthy because we stop paying attention to them. So the very first habit I had to do is I had to get my faith right. And I know that sounds really weird, but I had to make it a point to be with that faith-based community to continue to feed the right thoughts, energy, and habits for everything else. So as I put a priority list together, a lot of times we have our number one and it's seasonal, it sometimes changes. I had to keep number one as faith. I had to keep number two as spouse. Notice I didn't say career at number one or number two, because career all fell in line when number two and number one were taken care of. I put my children as number three. If I had to choose between a meeting that could be a potential $1 billion deal, or I had to choose between a son's or daughter's baseball game or gymnastics, I was going to choose baseball game or gymnastics. And the reason why is because that $1 billion deal, if it was going to happen today, well, it was probably going to happen tomorrow. And I let them know, you know what? If there's a deadline, I choose my family over the money. Now, most people would never make that decision in conscious or sane mind, because they'd be like, well, that $1 billion deal is going to set up my family for life. But you know what? It's going to come along eventually if it was meant to be. So I keep the urgency and the importance, but I also keep the priorities, or I try to keep those in mind. And granted, there's some times where maybe career comes up before kids or spouse, if there is something that I absolutely know is urgent, that I know that the family would be served better by that decision. So trying to keep that in a consistent light, I think that's important, because habits for me are getting enough sleep. Number two is eating the right foods. Number three is leading by example and leading our family and my spouse, because there are certain roles that we need to play to not only influence or impact the right people around us, but more importantly, they start picking up the habits that they're watching. And I knew that as a leader of a company, everything that I did, I didn't mind doing, all the way down, all the way up. I would actually, during the intermissions, when we would have thousands of people and we would clear out the auditorium, I would be the one picking up the trash and rearranging the chairs. I would be the one scanning the stage to make sure there were no pieces of tape or things, maybe jewelry, an earring that fell off. And I felt like that was my baby, right? And so when you care about something, all the habits tend to fall into place, but you got to take care of yourself in there too. And that is that number one thing. Faith and self has everything to do with that number one habit for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's so interesting, right? So obviously today, being who you are now, you've created a lot of positive habits. Now, I know you from getting on these calls and these, things where we're on calls with people in their own right, have had a ton of success. And I noticed that you're an incredible student of business, of the game. Obviously, as we've been talking, you're like, hey, Ken, whatever I can do to help you. Like, it's just so, the feeling I get just being around you is pretty incredible. What is your advice about that circle of people? I know you've said it a few times just in talking. A lot of times when I was in my 20s, I used to really care about what people thought of me. I was around the kind of the wrong crowd that wasn't going to places I wanted to go in my career. What are your thoughts around surrounding yourself with the right people?
Yeah, I think the right people are going to surround themselves with you if you're doing the right things. So many people are always looking for their tribe, and what ends up happening is they're almost forcing the issue. And here's what I mean by that. When I think of being able to not only have a servant leadership heart, I know that might come up a little bit. If you're constantly giving more than you're receiving, it's very simple. The people are going to show up, and they're going to want to do the same because they want to emulate what they see in you, because they see the good in you. There are other people, out there who might want to take advantage of that situation, but you're going to realize real quick, when they keep asking, or taking, we eventually slowly steer away from that. And as we do that, we continue on with what we do. And it's almost like, think about a truck going 5 miles an hour, right? If they really like that truck and it says, get on board if you want to go where we're going, and they've got that opportunity to hop on with you, it's amazing to see in the back of the truck how many people want to go where you're going. And sometimes as you explain your vision and where you're going and what you want to do and who you want to be with, people are like, hey, wait a second, that's me and that's what I want to do. So a lot of those times there might be along the way where people get off that truck, or we might kick them off, right? And that's okay too. So I would just say that, if we have a servant leadership, if we have giver's gain, according to BNI, and you might be familiar with BNI, with giver's gain, my wife introduced me to BNI and she said, look, we are in a networking group to where if you give more, you will receive. And so that was the whole attitude and premise as far as surrounding ourselves or finding our tribes with people who actually had the same like-mindedness. And I got to tell you, you go a lot farther with people like that. And it's a whole lot easier. You're not feeling like you're fighting uphill all the time. When challenge comes, you're doing it when you're locking arms with people, not trying to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, there's a saying I heard, I think Barb may have said it one time. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go with people, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, very cool. Any life lessons, just general life lessons, anything you want to, if you were to tell yourself again early in your career, your 20s, something that would help you, get in the right headspace, mindset, just in general, any life lessons you'd love to kind of tell yourself if you started over again, what would you share?
Yeah. The investment early on in life, I think, if we could always go back to our 20s, or, I know that we're in the, I don't want to say I'm in the second half of my life, but I would say this. I would have told myself, nobody cares what you drive and nobody cares where you live. Invest in yourself, and always either make more than you spend so you have something to invest and have a margin. Because guess what? The number one stressor of people marriage is money. It's finances. And so a lot of people say, well, you know what? The reason why you work so hard is because you want more. We live in a culture where it's excess. And I believe to work smart is more important than working hard. You're eventually going to have those times where you work hard. And I remember putting in those 80 to 100-hour weeks. Here's what I did. I did it. And I didn't develop other people along the way to do it with us. And so what happened is, you can only replicate yourself, or you can only do the things so much to where if you're not replicating yourself, you're eventually going to burn out. And you know what? People didn't really care the success level by the watch that was on the wrist. They cared by, what are you doing to pour into me and how can I go with you? I would have always invested early, because now that I know the time compounding of money, if a 20-year-old puts $10,000 away in either real estate or assets and it appreciates and it grows, and the power of time compounding, that money moves up and grows exponentially. Well, that's the same thing I wanted to do with work ethic. But what I didn't realize is I felt that it was all about personal growth. So I want to challenge anybody who's listening: community growth. Grow with the people that you want to grow with, and find that circle that's one rung or step above you. Hang out with them, ask questions, be curious, do whatever you need to do to stay in that orbit. Because in order to be in a higher level orbit, you have to have people who are doing things and moving in a different way than you're currently doing. And it doesn't matter how old you are. You could be 40, you could be 70, you could be 20. And if I could go back and tell myself, find those people who are at the top of the list, hang out with them, find out how they think, ask a lot of questions, and do what they do. And I would say that everything else will take care of itself all the way down.
Awesome. Well, I know it's coming up on 10:30, and I know you're a busy guy. We really appreciate you sharing all his wisdom with us today. Any just final thoughts? What are your goals now? Obviously, you've accomplished a lot. Tell us about that, and we'll kind of get things wrapped up. And thank you for taking the time this morning.
No, thank you. And when we have these conversations, I know we talked offline. One of my goals is to continue to give back in the way that you're doing. One of the things that I was really impressed with is when your story came out, when we first talked, a lot of times we don't really know what the future holds. And it's okay. It's okay to be uncertain. We also know that we have more control over it than we think. And it's based on what we're going to do today and what's going to be basically in our lives a year from now or a month from now. And so you have planted those seeds with your team and with what you do. And it was really cool to hear your story. I would just say my goal is for me to tell my story like you were able to tell yours. and you impacting the people that are around you and making each other better. Because I will say that there are people who sometimes are lost. More people want to follow than they want to lead. And I would say the biggest goal is to lead people who want to be followed, and also continue to learn from the leaders who have the right core values, who have the right things that are moving on in their life, and the things that we want. So always continue to have those three people in your life. It's the mentor, the person you're going to walk beside, and then also the person who's watching you, because somebody's watching you. It doesn't matter where you are and what you do. Somebody's always wanted to learn, but I always wanted to learn from those people so I could give them the benefit of what I've learned, and hopefully somebody's watching me as well. So hopefully that helps. I know that was a very vague answer, but man, we can talk about this all day, but I know that you do have things as well. So
no, totally. And it's so true. So obviously I hit the gym daily, and I always think about that, right? I think to myself, there's someone in here that's going to look at me and they're going to say, oh, thank goodness he's not working as hard as either, drinking the coffee, walking on the treadmill. Or they're going to say, God, that guy's really working hard. I need to raise my game a little bit. And they're going to say something internally, right? And my hope is that we just inspire people to do good and make an impact and create what they want to create in their lives and make a positive influence. So Matt, thank you so much. Thank you again. Can everybody take their computers, their cell phones, whatever, and say thank you?
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Awesome
Thank you,
stuff.
Matt.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, and please follow Matt Storm. Matt, do you want to share a little bit of your where they can follow you and follow some of your videos and your podcast? So
yeah, the best thing, we got a podcast coming up. It'll be live here in about 3 hours. It's the Friday Fitcast on YouTube, as well as Facebook Live on my personal page, which is Matthew Storm. Or you can go to Matt Storm Official on Instagram, and we do a lot of our interaction there as well.
Awesome. Please follow Matt, guys. An incredible guy, obviously. And let's get his followership up and promote his brand. So thank you so much, Matt. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome weekend. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Ken. Honored to be here.
All right. Take care, man.